The next domino of the NFL trade season has officially fallen, with Geno Smith being traded to the Las Vegas Raiders to reunite with Pete Carroll and to possibly be the bridge quarterback for the future of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, as valuable of a trade as this might be, giving up only a third-round pick, the number 92 overall selection, to get Geno Smith to be the quarterback for the next few years of this team, while it possibly does give this team a bridge to possibly make the playoffs these next couple of years with a somewhat solid roster, a good tight end in Brock Bowers, solid wide receiver in Jacoby Myers, you wonder if this is pushing the envelope a little bit too much from Pete Carroll, the Raiders front office, and this entire organization to bring in a guy in Geno Smith who you are going to have to pay, you are going to have to play, and you are going to have him be the face of your franchise for at least probably 2 seasons. This is also the second straight year where we see Aiden O'Connell kind of pushed to the side again. And, Aiden O'Connell is not a great quarterback by any metric. He's not really even a good quarterback, but he's not been a guy that's had much of a chance to showcase himself as a possible option. It seemed like every single time the last 2 years where he has put himself in a position to possibly actually get a chance, the Raiders just go a different direction. And maybe that's because they're around him every day and they just don't like what they see, or maybe they just feel like they have better options at their disposal. This possibly also really signifies that there was no shot that the Raiders, even selecting at number 6, had any chance of getting either Shedeur Sanders, who I think really was coveted by the Raiders at that number 6 overall selection, or Cam Ward in this draft. It probably also signifies that they didn't like any of the other options in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. Guys like Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart even. They didn't see either of those guys as a better option than just getting Geno Smith. As far as how this affects the Raiders' future, I think it's guaranteed that they're going to take one of either Will Campbell or whoever they feel is the best possible offensive lineman in this year's draft. When you have Geno Smith, you have to have an offensive line in front of him. They have Jackson Powers-Johnson. They have a couple other okay pieces, but they need an offensive lineman that they can count on day in and day out, either to be on the interior or at tackle. And throughout the rest of the draft, it's just going to be acquiring more playmakers. It's going to be targeting a running back in the 2nd round. It's going to be filling out the defense with playmakers at pass rusher or in the secondary on defense and free agency. And look, I just don't know what this actually does for the Raiders. I have never been the biggest Geno Smith fan while he's been in Seattle. I can admit, though, that he's been a guy that's put the Seattle Seahawks in position to be successful on offense. That cannot be disagreed with. He does have high interception totals, but he also puts the ball in his playmakers' hands a lot, and he can be a guy that consistently can be called upon to get the ball to the playmakers. And, it's not a bad thing to have Geno Smith as your quarterback, but I do think it's the wrong idea to think this fixes the Raiders' situation. Yes, when Geno Smith got to the Seahawks with Pete Carroll as his head coach, his career took off. After sitting behind Russell Wilson for a short time, once he finally got his hands on the starting quarterback position under Pete Carroll, he never let it go, and he was successful when he was there with Pete Carroll. That cannot be questioned. What can be questioned is whether or not he was put into the ultimate position to succeed. You go to a roster, you go to an offense that has Tyler Lockett when he still was in his prime, DK Metcalf, you draft Jackson Smith and Jigba, you have guys like Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet at running back, and you have a defense that wasn't ultimately great, but they were a solid enough defense that could get after the quarterback at certain moments. They always have had, since Geno Smith was there, they always have had very good secondary play. And I think if you compare the situation he walked into in Seattle to the situation he's walking into in Las Vegas, it's night and day difference. Las Vegas doesn't have a running back. Las Vegas doesn't have a second receiver. Unless you really think Trey Tucker is that guy, they don't have a number 2 receiver. Even if Trey Tucker is that guy, they don't have a number 3 receiver. They have a number 1 tight end. They have possibly a top 5 tight end in the NFL. And a guy who, if his rookie season is any indication, is going to break records at the tight end position. But I don't know if Geno Smith in his career has been a tight end happy passer. I really don't know if that's the case. And look, if some of these guys that are up in free agency for the defense of this team walk out the door, if Trayvon Merrick walks out the door, if Nate Hobbs walks out the door, if Malcolm Kuntz walks out the door, if they aren't able to supplement those losses with equal, if not better, additions, this team is nowhere near the Chargers, the Chiefs, not even the Broncos. They're by far the worst roster in the AFC West if some of these guys leave. If they can't address the running back with a top-tier solution, they have to get a guy that they feel good about in the second round. They cannot wait. They cannot wait in free agency even. If they don't get a Najee Harris, if they don't get an Aaron Jones, and they're settling for someone in the A.J. Dillon range, or settling for somebody that's just not a top option that is available. This team, you just replace Aiden O'Connell with Geno Smith, you're not changing your future. You're not. You're just not. And I just disagree with this move from the Raiders position. Geno Smith, yes, performed very well when he was with Pete Carroll those first couple of years. Last year was not good for Geno Smith. From a playmaking standpoint, from a getting sacked standpoint, from a standpoint of just this guy looked like he was ready to blame everybody else for his shortcomings. And it really, you ask any Seahawks fan about how they felt about Geno Smith last year, they'd be lying to themselves if they think they had a good year, that he had a good year. Even in a 10-7 season, there was never a moment where you believed in the Seahawks with Geno Smith at quarterback last year. And I think for the Seahawks, this, I think deserves another video for how well they made out from this deal. They got out of that cap situation. They're not going to pay Geno Smith $30, even $40+ million a year. And that's a blessing in disguise, if you ask me. I could be completely wrong. I could be totally wrong. But look, you compare this situation to the rest of the AFC West. Geno Smith's not better than Mahomes. He's not better than Herbert. I would say at this point he's not better than Bo Nix. The wide receiver position, Jacoby Myers by himself with Trey Tucker, you're going to compare that to what the Chargers have even with McConkey, Johnston, and whoever else they add? Even Denver. I don't see why Jacoby Myers is just, by himself better than Cortland Sutton or Marvin Mims or, the whole offense that Denver has. I just don't see it for Las Vegas. They also don't have an offensive line. They really don't. They have Jackson Powers-Johnson, like I mentioned, but if they don't address that properly in this year's draft and in the free agency market this year, they're going nowhere. And they're going to be a dumpster fire by the end of the year if they don't do everything they have to do to put a team around Geno Smith. Because if you do put a good team around him, he can succeed. But with how the Raiders are constructed now, this is looking like a poor situation for Geno Smith and the Raiders.